So folks, there's a second part to the E step that's really important and that really separates this model from other anxiety models. And that is the notion of motivation. And how do we enhance motivation? Because remember, anxiety sees cobras. And how do we help kids learn to go after and go touch a cobra when every bit and fiber of their being is telling them not to? And so that's really important to remember with anxiety work, is you have to help kids have sufficient motivation, and understanding is part of what helps create motivation to do this work. So what are the things in a parent's toolbox that we can use to increase motivation? So the first thing we can use is reward systems. And so again, you can have access to a reward sheet, but when I work with kids, I create a point system. Kids get points for practicing skills, and kids get points for doing challenges. And when they get a certain amount of points, they then get that reward, and I have small, medium, and large rewards. So small rewards are things kids can maybe get on a daily basis. A medium reward is by the end of a week, and a large reward might be an end of a month. And so in my system, 5 points is what we want to shoot for a day. So we're practicing things, and we'll talk about what you can practice, but all those skills you've already seen. You could practice calming, you could practice talking back to your worries, you could practice breaking things down, learning things, rehearsing. You could practice figuring out what your thoughts are telling you, what part of my brain. These are all things we can practice, or we can get points by doing things that make us anxious. So to think about reward system and follow through is really important. And a little word, if you do have siblings or other kids in the house, I would encourage you to do a similar system across the board. But what I say when I work with families, that kids get rewarded for doing different things. So one of my kids has anxiety, so she might get rewards for doing this work, or another child might get rewards for organization, for cleaning, for helping, because that's where they struggle. So I say to kids, we try to help and reward what's hard for us. Another thing that can really help with motivation, and we learn this in a larger body of work called Stages of Change, and I might encourage you to Google it and read. It's a really good model for how we help kids understand where they are in their natural change process. But it's about finding the hook, about finding, why do I want to do this hard thing? And so for my kids, for example, why might I want to take that test? Because they might want to get into a good school. So helping to remind them, that's why we're doing this testing practice. That's why we're overcoming our anxiety, because you'll have to take tests in college. Or a kid who, wants to have a dating life in their future. Reminding them that's why we're working on these things and challenging our anxiety now, because it's going to help you in the future. So that's a big other thing, we call it finding the hook. Another thing that can help with motivation is actually doing some tracking. Because a lot of times with anxiety, we can be discouraged. Our anxiety can try to convince us, as one of its tricks, that we're not making progress. So sort of tracking things, how they get easier. If you keep practicing giving presentations, how it starts to get easier with time, and kind of using that scaling we talked about. So what is it now to give a 1-minute presentation versus 3 weeks ago when we started? The last thing that can really help with motivation is really trying, they call it a functional analysis, where we try to slow down and understand what are the barriers, what's getting in the way of doing this stuff. And we want to look at the barriers, and we want to try to figure out solutions that help overcome them But remember, the key with anxiety is that it doesn't involve avoidance. So what we want you to start thinking about, what's in your toolbox? What can you start to bring out and set up with your kids to help them do the work? Because anxious work is really hard and important. What do you think would work for them to do that? And also in the classroom, teachers, what do you think you need to implement to help kids do things? And remember and think about it, what would get you to touch a cobra? Even though it's not a cobra, in our brain it is. What kind of rewards would need to be in place to help? And remember, that's where being really celebratory of any practice, of any movement, of any learning to fight anxiety is really important. To be a really big cheerleader and excited for any positive progress that breaks avoidance. And so parents and teachers, that's a big part of anxiety work, is recognizing what leads to good motivation and building in the right motivation system to help your child, kid, student, or teen approach rather than avoid.